I've said this before, but I don't know if you remember the days 2000s when people were afraid to put their credit card in online. And
Right.
it took a consumer habit to develop before that kind of generosity habit developed.
I think that we are in a very ripe time here for subscription model giving, and also have a lot of people who have a high philanthropic intent and subscribing to 15 different things in their daily lives,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is a very good environment for us to just be doing recurring first.
Welcome to the Sustainable Giving Podcast, Woodrow.
Thanks, Dave. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
It's going to be fun. You and I got a chance to you and I have been at several conferences together. But the world that I feel like I'm entering your world when I go to these conferences, by the way. Um, and I mean that in all humility and respect. But you and I got a chance to hang out at the AFP Icon conference in Seattle just a few weeks ago. And one of the things I really appreciated about actually not just seeing you in the social setting, but seeing you in just the kind of thoughtful person trying to help bring some sanity to the world of philanthropy. So it was fun to see that.
Well, that's very flattering. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was really great. And one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of today, our connection really is in this sector that we called philanthropy. Now, your background, as I understand it, is much more in that broader brand. What does it look like to create a movement, whether or not that's for a cause or for a brand, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't come from a nonprofit sector background, uh, which sounds like it's a weirder connection than it feels.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been a very natural, and it's just, kind of one thing led to another situation. But yeah, my background is in brand and brand strategy and thinking about how to move markets, um, and make people feel connected. It just, this is for philanthropy.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite quotes that I remember, this was a Dan Pallotta quote, that I loved, was that philanthropy is the market for love. And I just thought, man, at first it kind of cringed, like, oh, are we marketing love? Are we selling love here? But then I thought, and the way he said it, which I thought was very poetic, was, philanthropy is the market for whom no other market is coming, right? We have the
Hmm.
forces of capitalism, and we have, government intervention, and all of the pieces, but there's always people left behind.
There are, and
Um,
I mean, that's an interesting framing, because I think in this sector we tend to think of a lot of the current challenges, societal challenges, as obstacles to us instead of our opportunity, and so I think you could look at the nonprofit sector as delivering belonging. So instead of worrying about, oh no, people don't feel belonging and therefore it's difficult for us to make genuine connections, we're the antidote to that.
yeah.
We're actually, we have the, product for that.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and belonging and meaning and connection, and the this is a time for us to show up in a way that is a lot more genuine, because
Mhm.
that is actually what we're transacting, arguably, not the dollars.
Yeah. Yeah, we're bringing that. And that's I mean, that's what struck me about that idea that philanthropy is the market for love. It's, we are bringing belonging, we are bringing community. I've talked a lot about what the joy of generosity looks like.
Hmm.
You and I were in a dinner setting recently talking about, like, generosity, and I just love that conversation. So when you think about generosity, how would you define it, and what do you think there's something what is something about generosity that you think people today misunderstand?
Well, the second part of that is easier to answer, I think, right? Like,
We'll start there.
people think it's transactions from people who have something to people who don't.
Yep.
So it's not that. Um, and what it is a little bit more ephemeral. I mean, it's something about how we show up in order to make our communities better. Um, and I don't know. I mean, there gets into this whole philosophical thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
does it matter whether that's truly altruistic and that you have no stake in it or not? And I don't think it does. I mean, I think we clearly get a lot out of being generous, directly and indirectly. And so I think that that seems to be kind of a specious argument and a red herring, right? Like, that's not really the issue, right? It's about
Yeah.
showing up to make things better, and people do that in lots of ways. But it's not about a transaction. It's about something else. And I'm always struck by something somebody said to me. I was at a Gates Foundation conference, and the woman at my table said, she didn't know she was poor until she went away to school.
Mm.
She grew up in a housing project, and she said, "Well, I thought did great because we always had something to give, and someone was always giving to us." And she had that abundance mindset until then she went to university and suddenly was being told that she was the recipient of generosity,
Yeah.
and she was only on that side of the ledger. And I thought that's really striking, right? The
Mm.
generosity isn't really about flows of capital. It's about collectively doing something for collective good.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, we're all in need of generosity. I think it's so easy for us to think they need generosity.
Right.
And then if you think about it, it doesn't take very long to realize moments where you've experienced generosity.
Of course. Yeah.
And I
Uh,
think to your point, it's not a transaction. We think of it as, okay, did somebody literally give me something? Like I might write a check to an organization, but that's really interesting.
that we're also seeing more and more that generosity and things like pro-sociality, civic participation, civil society support, that these are not actually distinct things. The
Yeah,
generosity is kind of the foundational element of how we show up, which we call civic intent, right? The degree to which someone has the desire, the motivation to make positive change.
yeah, that's so good. Well, one of the things that really first connected us was, you serve as the chief data officer for Giving Tuesday, and I remember, by the way, being an old fundraiser. This is my 20th year of fundraising as we record this. And I remember when Giving Tuesday hit the scene first. And got to be honest, the first reaction was skepticism. Like, Giving Tuesday, really? I mean, Black Friday, Giving Tuesday. Well, it seems to have worked out.
It caught on a little bit.
What was do you remember, not to put you on the spot? I mean, what was this last year's kind of total philanthropic? Because now you're looking at global
Mhm.
generosity around Giving Tuesday itself. And then I want to actually broaden the aperture, because Giving Tuesday, spoiler alert, is not just a day anymore.
Yeah, I mean, well, Giving Tuesday this year in the US, we saw 37 million people participate,
Yeah.
um, donating $3.6 billion. And also, of course, volunteering, giving things, being advocates, doing all of the things we do, as part of that generosity. Um, Around the world, Giving Tuesday officially, quote unquote, happens in now 105 countries, where
Hmm.
there's like somebody has stood up to steward the movement, and we support those organizations through our global hubs and through our central organization and through the movement. And of course, hundreds of thousands of organizations, tens of millions of people around the world, in a moment of celebration. and
Yeah.
and then, as you alluded, also getting involved in various ways all year round.
Yeah. So take our listeners back, because I don't want to assume, I know Giving Tuesday is a pretty high name awareness. But like, how did it start? And then how has Giving Tuesday changed since those early days?
So I used to talk about this in terms of how important it is to ask questions, and how asking the right question makes such a huge difference. And you don't always know what's going to be that question that ends up being pivotal, right? So I think about this when we're talking about research setting KPI and like what is the right research question really matters. And we get that wrong a lot of the time. There's a story a colleague of mine told me in my commercial days of a diaper brand asking people what's most important in a diaper. And people said it's absorbency. And then when you message about your diaper's absorbency, you lose market share.
Yeah.
Because it's the wrong question, because everybody trusts the top diaper brands to be absorbent.
It
That's
better
not a,
be.
it's not a, yeah, right? It's like the minimum, that's the table stakes. And so we make that mistake in the nonprofit sector all the time. Is it important to you that the organization not waste your money? Yes, it's extremely important. Therefore, that's what I'll talk about. Instead of my mission, instead of the outcomes, instead of the feeling you're going to get by giving to my cause, I'll tell you that I'm not going to waste your money, right? Which is like, what? It's like me coming to you and saying, hey, if you give me money, I'm not going to kick a puppy. Well, I didn't think you were going to kick a
Trademark
puppy. You've just given me this idea that might have been on the
that
table.
was an
right?
option.
Yeah. And Giving Tuesday, there's a great story about this guy, Edwin, and his daughter at the beach. And his last name is eluding me right now, but he takes a picture of her at the beach in 1954. And she wants to know why she can't see the picture right now.
Yeah.
And he takes inspiration from that question and invents Polaroid film,
I
like
love that.
instant film, right? So Giving Tuesday was a question like that,
Okay.
that turns out to be much more profound than you expect. What if we have a day for giving? That's it. What if we had a day for giving? Like Henry Timms and Asha Curran working 92nd Street Wire, just like, what if we had a day for giving? Let's try it. And didn't try to own it, didn't try to capture it, didn't brand it with the logo of the organization. Just were like, we're going to have this thing. What if we have a day for giving? Let's see if it takes off. And obviously, I mean, that's a simplification. There was a lot of work that went into this, right? But it's a simple idea, and it gave people this catalyzing moment that turns out to be the answer to the question. Turns out to be extraordinarily profound. If we have a day for giving, it will galvanize people around the world around a core principle of humanity. Mm-hmm. It will catalyze, motivate countless acts of good. It will create this movement that is enabling nonprofits. It's helping us understand what our relationship with our supporters should and can be. It's unlocking lots and lots of money and fundraising, and those donors turn out to have a higher retention and to a high lifetime value, and they're giving in multiple ways. And we've extended the giving season by weeks. All of these things end up being very, very profound impacts, and it looks different everywhere around the world because it's this perfect combination of based on something that is universal and open to be interpreted contextually where you are. So that has a very powerful ability to scale.
Yeah. Well, it's been amazing seeing it scale from those early years. I mean, I think I did hear about it the first year, but I would say probably the third year, it was like, okay, are you going to do something about this?
Right.
And at this point, it's a global phenomenon, which is so incredible to see. And I do think, to our earlier conversation around the joy of generosity, like I do think that Giving Tuesday is an embodiment of that day in which we can um, express who we are and gain joy from that.
And I mean, how it sort of acts as that pivotal moment is partly due to the fact that so many of our motivations and our moments to express our generosity are around crisis and emergency.
Yeah.
And this did create this moment of getting all of that feeling we get and the benefit that we get from showing up and helping without it having to be in response to something bad.
Yeah, I didn't even thought about it that way. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, one of the things that surprised me though, especially in recent years, is the role that sustainable recurring giving has been playing in Giving Tuesday and on Giving Tuesday itself. So in a minute, I want to broaden the aperture for how Giving Tuesday is actually the organization, and you and your work with the Data Commons is contributing candidly to philanthropy and generosity at large. But sticking on Giving Tuesday, talk a little bit about some of the stats and what you're seeing in the space around what's happening with sustainable recurring giving.
Yeah, it's interesting. So first up, from the Giving Tuesday the day perspective, that's been an interesting thing, because we could see early on, as we started this Data Commons work, that Giving Tuesday was driving a lot of new donors. It was a great acquisition moment. In fact, Giving Tuesday is the single biggest day for donor acquisition all year by a
Wow.
lot.
Yeah.
Um, I looked at that and thought, as a marketer, I expected there's usually a trade-off, right? The thing that's going to drive a lot of acquisition isn't going to retain as well as something
Right.
else,
Yep. It's going to be,
typically,
yep.
right? It's usually
Right.
a trade-off. So I actually expected we would see lower retention, and we see the opposite.
Hmm.
Giving Tuesday acquired donors are retained at a higher level. That's interesting, because I think it speaks to the power of that different type of engagement. And what we're seeing, so part of the story there is a higher proportion of new recurring gifts on Giving Tuesday compared to other times of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the story, and that's really important. Giving Tuesday also, I mean, it's very appealing and has high awareness across every demographic, but it's particularly strong with young adults. And recurring giving skews into that segment. So that's also helpful. Um, and I think a lot of organizations are like, I don't know what to do with I got to do something for Giving Tuesday. Maybe I'll just try to upgrade all my one-time donors, which is a great strategy.
Yeah.
I not nothing wrong with that strategy. I think, in fact, we should be thinking about recurring uh, as a much more primary strategy, but that works. But all of a variety of factors just conspire there. Overall, what we're seeing is retention in the sector
Yeah.
annual is bad. We are not
Donor
like
retention year
donor
over year,
retention.
single
Yeah.
gift mostly. Yeah.
Yep. And that has a lot to do with over indexing on high net worth givers and ignoring the grassroots, and they churn more. And recurring giving being, I think, dramatically under leveraged.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that blew me away was the number of recurring gifts, recurring donors that sign up for recurring giving on Giving Tuesday itself. Now, check me on this, or we can check it in update in the show notes if we need to. But I think the number I had saw, and I think this was 22, 23, was that 12% of all recurring gifts, and I think it was in the year, essentially were started on Giving Tuesday itself. Does
So
that
it
sound
does
about right?
it does vary from platform to platform. I think
Okay.
that was probably Neon's recurring giving report that you're
Okay.
looking at.
Yeah.
And in aggregate, we do see a somewhat lower level than that. It's a bit hard to actually pin down,
Yeah.
but our data show that we see a substantial increase, or a substantially higher number of recurring gifts. It varies a lot year to year, though.
Yeah.
And that, I think, has a lot to do with just what strategies organizations are showing up with and what's trending
Yeah.
in, right? Because we don't
Yeah.
run the campaigns, they do.
Right. Well, and just the thing that blows me away, though, because I work with a lot of organizations, obviously, I speak to a lot of organizations, wrote a book on the topic. And the thing with recurring sustainable giving is it's harder to acquire a new recurring donor typically than it
Yeah.
is to acquire a new single gift donor. Single gift donors, you can rely a little bit more on that impulse, the disaster response moment, but then, as we'll talk about in a little bit, the percentage of those that give again, and especially give again in a following year, is very low, embarrassingly so. But the thing to me, to not only have charities, it's hard work to get people to sign up for a recurring gift as their first gift. So to have whatever the percentage is, having a significant number of them choosing to do so on Giving Tuesday, it's like, that's a bright spot.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be learned there, including, I mean, another finding from Neon's recurring giving report was the majority of new recurring givers um, acquired on Giving Tuesday gave again before the end of the year, gave a single gift in addition.
That's amazing.
There's a lot more opportunity, and we it just it's so much is just about thinking differently. Like you're right, all things being equal, you can expect your conversion rate on a recurring ask to be lower, but all things are not equal. And I think it's very telling that where cost of acquisition is highest, the experience is 100% recurring, right? So if you're doing door-to-door fundraising, you're only asking for recurring gifts
Yep. You've got
because
to
you
have
can't
that value.
afford
Yep.
to be dealing with one-off gifts from people. But that means what do we learn from that, right? Like if our most of these door-to-door companies
Yep.
strategies are, someone says, well, I can't give monthly, but I can make a one-time gift. You're like, well, then go and find the website and move to the next door, right? Like, don't even help them do that. And
Yeah.
yet here we are in an environment where the cost of acquisition is much, much lower. Like every other channel is less cost than that. And we think recurring needs to be a secondary ask, right? But we should
Right.
get even more return on investment if
Yep.
we make it more the priority more often. And I think that a lot of it is just making that the default is going to tend to get you a better result. Now, it depends, right? I mean, there might be times when what you need is a lot of people coming on board to do an advocacy campaign, or you need to seed crowdfunding, or like lots of specific circumstances where your strategy might be best. But I think recurring as a default is dramatically under leveraged. And we've actually measured what we think that missed opportunity looks like now. What it would mean if
Yeah.
that was just a little bit more prevalent.
Are you looking to build a thriving recurring giving program but not sure where to start? I want to introduce you today to the Sustainable Giving Self Assessment. Developed from years of research and thousands of hours of experience, this short assessment is for nonprofit leaders and fundraisers who want to build a long lasting stream of sustainable recurring revenue. Go to sustainablegiving.org to take this free assessment. It's just 30 questions and takes 7 minutes. Afterward, you'll receive a personalized report on the state of your recurring giving program and what areas you should focus on. Are you ready to get clarity on how to grow sustainable giving? Go online and take the assessment today at sustainablegiving.org. Not only is you are at the organization Giving Tuesday, but Giving Tuesday has this thing called the Data Commons, and you've referenced it. So let's talk about that, because what you are doing, at least from what I can see and what I've been cheerleading, is you're helping to shine a light on what's happening with generosity across the sector. So talk a little bit about the Data Commons, and then let's dive into what that opportunity is, because I'm fascinated by that, that research that you did.
Yeah, thank you. The Data Commons started as an effort to understand what was happening on Giving Tuesday. We just like, can we
Fair.
get some metrics?
Yeah.
And we ran into the problem in the sector of the data are not good, and there aren't good tools for analyzing or collecting or aggregating and seeing. And I, coming from the commercial marketing sector, like this is where we have an incredibly robust ecosystem of data infrastructure that helps us answer questions about our marketplace and the actors in our marketplace. And we just didn't exist. So we had to build it. We had to build something in order to start answering those questions just for this intervention that we were trying ourselves. Yeah. And then because we were having to build something in order to answer our own questions, well, that opened up lots of opportunity to learn about, first, online fundraising, and then fundraising and philanthropy, and then more broadly how people, like, what are the capital flows, and now what is the holistic nature of generosity around the world? How do people bring themselves to make change? How do these behaviors intersect and interact? What values are behind them? What is the enabling environment for that? The the ways in which these behaviors and opportunities propagate, why people do it, the impact of their giving that related to all kinds of factors in communities, and partly that's pragmatic. Like if we want a robust nonprofit sector, we need to better understand that ecosystem in which we exist, where we are not the majority player. Most giving is not monetary, and most giving doesn't involve a nonprofit.
Hmm.
But we've only, I mean, historically, only really
Yeah.
counted the donations to nonprofits as the thing. It's not. I mean, it's dwarfed by even things as simple as financial remittances. Like that dwarfs all of philanthropy, all individual giving, all corporate giving, and all foundation giving, and all international aid.
What do you mean by financial remittances? Just
So
so I.
people sending money home to
Okay.
family
Yeah.
and
Okay.
community,
Yep.
right? Like that is much bigger than everything else monetary, like
Right.
by a lot.
Huh.
So we've had to build both the data assets and the tools in the ecosystem in order to get that understanding. But by doing that, we are starting now. These tools are getting us to the point where we can start to use them together. We can use our 990 data infrastructure, the fundraising effectiveness project data, our Giving Pulse data about what people do and what they think about generosity, and we can put this together in order to see what is the opportunity and what's being missed, and can we quantify it. And in case of recurring, we see that about 2% of new gifts are recurring gifts. Within that 2%, there's a lot of difference. Like some organizations doing way better than that, being like making it a much higher priority. And it seems pretty clear that another 5 points is absolutely doable.
Yeah.
That would be next year, that would be $10 billion more if we get
Wow.
5% more of those new gifts, which I tell you is like that's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
12% is absolutely like probably take us a little bit of time to get there, move this industry more toward this as a
Mm-hmm.
default behavior, the way it is in a lot of other countries around the world. And if we did that, that'd be $20 billion a year. But that's the first year,
Yeah.
right? After that, that higher retention, you start building on a more solid, better retained base, and we start to see much bigger upside potential from recurring giving. It's
Yeah.
dramatically under leveraged.
No, it's huge. I mean, and that I did some math, and I love it when different methods come to similar
Yeah.
results. It's billions. I mean, the number
Yep.
that I did was honestly much more kind of overarching, and it was just if we just took the 75% of charities that have historically been left behind with regards to doing recurring giving, because I do think there's
Mm.
definitely historically been some haves and have nots.
Yep.
And a lot of it has to do with the nature of the charity and their programming. And, you know, if you could do one-to-one, style sponsorship or membership, that's the other historically
Yeah.
really strong
Yeah.
type of recurring giving, you probably were ahead of your peers.
Right.
But the problem is that's only about 25% of charities by my math. So
Yeah.
75% of charities, the food banks, the relief and
Mm-hmm.
development, the education groups have been historically left behind. And so the math that I looked at was just the growth in individual giving from those 5% over in this case, if you span it over to a decade, and it makes my number look conservative now. Actually, my number was $119 billion, but
Right.
over a decade, right?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is we're seeing increasing recurring giving. I want to call out one of the stats. So you mentioned the 2% number, which, just to make sure I'm clear, that's essentially the percentage of new donors that are recurring
That's right.
straight from the beginning has been basically stuck at
Right.
2% for about
Yeah.
5 years, right?
Yes, and we've been roughly seeing that of all donors about 6%. So 2% of the new ones are recurring, and that leaves
Six
a pool
percent
of
overall.
about 6%, which tells you as well, like if you're getting 2% every year and you're stuck at 6%, it also means we're just churning a lot because we're not seeing any growth there.
Yeah.
So that's the total pool. It's I mean, in some places, the vast majority, like in Spain, almost all gifts are recurring.
Right. Yeah, you go over to the EU and it's a different conversation. Regular giving is like, what do you mean? That is this new to everybody?
Right.
So the thing that's exciting to me though, Woodrow, is there's a bright spot there, and that is you mentioned that 6%, but over that same 5 year time period, it used to be 3.7%,
That's right.
and now it's up to
Yeah.
6%. So we've
That's
seen the
right.
actual, you know, share of donors nearly double
Yeah.
over the last 5 years. But, and I think the 2%, meaning 2% new, it does point to what are we doing in terms of how do we acquire people into that. And so I think the work certainly that Giving Tuesday has done, but also just candidly the cultural shift that we've seen where people are signing up more and more for recurring as their first
Yeah.
gift is super
Yeah.
encouraging.
Yeah. And I think we just have to be a little more brave. It's been really telling. I mean, we tend to think about the outcomes for our sector as what happened to us, we really would benefit from thinking about it as what we accomplished,
Mm,
because we build these systems that are getting the outcome for which they're designed. And it's not to say that there aren't exigent circumstances or that somebody's mission or approach or programming might be more clearly inclined toward recurring than someone else's. But when I talk to organizations in Spain, and I remember distinctly being there in 2018 and talking about how the problem is we built an entire system around recurring giving, and we don't know how to get one-time gifts out of people. We don't know how to get them to level up. We don't know how to get them to. We have no practice for
yeah.
doing that, right? They built a system around something else, and they were trying to figure out how do we change people's understanding of what they are allowed to ask for and how they might do it. They had a whole bunch of fundraisers who are afraid to ask for one-time gifts because they were like, but I've already got their recurring gift. I like that's their thing, right?
Yeah.
So these limiting, like they're the same limiting beliefs, the same systems that get it out, but it just the like bizarro world mirror image of what we
Yep.
have
Two
in
sides
the
of the
US.
coin. Oh man, that's so interesting. Yeah. I think your point about we just need to be brave, and I think it candidly is a little bit easier to be brave when you start to see your peers, when you start to see other
Of course.
organizations. And that's the thing that excites me about this moment in time is, 10 years ago when I started talking about this, Woodrow, I mean, again, recurring giving's been around for millennia. I've been doing it for 20
Yeah.
years. But 10
Right.
years ago was like, there are these subscriptions that are really cropping up again in a North American context.
Mhm.
And I wonder if those are going to start to have an influence as they change our consumer behavior. I wonder if that's going to start to
Yeah,
shift the way
for
people
sure.
think about their philanthropic behavior. Because I've said this before, but I don't know if you remember the days, the 2000s when people were afraid to put their credit card in online, and
Right.
it
Yeah.
was just like it took a consumer habit to develop before that kind of generosity habit developed.
I think that we are in a very um like a ripe time here for subscription model giving, and also have a lot of people who have a high philanthropic intent, and and are price conscious, and subscribing to 15 different things in their daily lives,
Yeah.
right? Like this is a very good environment for us to just be doing recurring first.
Well, and then people ask me, you mentioned younger donors, and that's a common question I get after I speak. Oh, is this for younger donors? And the answer is it's for everybody. My
Yeah.
grandparents are part of the subscription economy.
Hmm.
However, just like with digital giving, the younger the individual, the more native,
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know about you, I remember a time before the internet, right?
I
So
remember that.
I'm
Yes.
I'm technically, I guess, not a digital native. I'm an early immigrant.
Yeah.
Um, but the same thing with subscriptions. So my kids are growing up in a world where they know nothing but like, isn't that how things work?
Right. But
Right? And
yeah.
so that to me only bodes well for the future. Not only are subscriptions for everybody today, and it has changed giving behavior across generations, but again, my kids who don't know anything more. And by the way, I think I don't know if you heard. I think when we were at that dinner, I shared this. My 11-year-old set up her first first recurring gift, which, Daddy wrote a book on it, so I'm trying not to be give her pressure here. But
Right.
one of the things we've talked about, as parents and our family, is like, what does it look like to live a life of generosity?
Mm.
And so, my youngest daughter, we've talked about that. She did a fundraiser the other day, a couple months ago, with her sister, and it was a beautiful, like, raised money to fight human trafficking, and it was such a cool experience. But, and Woodrow, this was the fun part for me a few weeks later, because we talked about what does a lifestyle of generosity look like, and I want you to think about that. And when we're teaching them budgeting, it's always give, save,
Mm.
spend. That's what Daddy always says. It's like,
Yeah.
we give, we save, and then we spend, right? And so she came to me and she said, Daddy, I want to give to the Humane Society in basically our county. And I was like, cool. And so she did the math, and based on her allowance, Woodrow, she's 11, so she gets $11 a month if she does her chores or whatever, right? And so she said, I want to give $1, but I want to give to 3 different charities. I want to give $1 a month to 3 different charities and the Humane Society. So basically every 3 months she wanted to give $1.
Yeah.
Can you imagine Daddy's panic when she went onto the website to give $1 every 3 months? I thought
Yeah.
they're gonna reject her. But to my pleasant surprise, thank you, Kitsap Humane Society, by the way. It was a $1 every 3 months, and I was like,
So
that's not going
smart.
to accept this
So
transaction.
smart. So smart.
Oh
Like,
my
yes,
gosh.
right? Like, of course we should say yes to that, right? Like, what are we and this is the thing. This is the other part of recurring that's so powerful that we're not even like we talk about the economics of it, but that speaks to an understanding that this is about entering into a different kind of relationship
Yep.
with a giver, with a supporter who now is signed up to be part of your team. So how are you going to deliver on that experience for them? And it
Oh,
can break you out of a whole transactional model and mindset, because you're not, yes, you should absolutely give them opportunities to give again and more and upside, all those things. But it's not just that. It doesn't
yep.
have to be just that, because they're in your ecosystem now, and you can make it a more compelling ongoing engagement with them, just like you should be anyway. Right.
Right.
But it gives us a little more freedom to do that because they're a subscriber now,
Yep.
and they've subscribed to being part of the mission and feeling good about their impact. And my job is to deliver on that, and I will do that by engaging them more often in more ways. Is I mean, my kids, same thing. Every year on their birthdays and on Giving Tuesday, we talk about what they want to be, what they want to support,
Mm-hmm.
and set up the recurring gifts and do the budget and that whole thing. And it's
Yeah.
fascinating to me to see how some organizations don't get it.
Yeah.
Right? Some organizations who are not understanding that this is about being in a different and better dialogue, and instead it's just, and then a year later they get a thing. It's the same thing everybody gets, and it just asks them if they'll, could it be more, please?
Yeah.
Like, it's just weak.
Well, and my I loved the fact that she got a handwritten, or it was a letter. It was her thank you letter, right? It was hand signed, and it essentially said, Emma, thank you so much for your generosity of $1 every 3 months. you know,
So great.
Mail merge or whatever. But just it was the same kind of effusive generosity, and she was like, she's Gen Alpha, she doesn't get letters, so
Right.
that was pretty
Special.
cool.
Yeah.
And she came and showed me, and to your point, like, those donors, the best one-time donors you have on your file are your recurring donors, because they're the most likely. I find with clients it's a minimum of usually about 25%. So if you take your annual recurring giving from a donor, so in the case of Emma, $4, you should get an additional dollar, 25% from her.
Right.
But and so when we look at charities that we work with, that's often the case. So if they bring in $1 million, they should expect to see another $250,000. I have a client that I looked at 2 weeks ago, and they're at like 41%. So every dollar that donors give in recurring gifts, they give 41 cents additionally during that same year. in one-time gifts.
And this is what's so interesting about that is that's looking at it in aggregate, right? Like we see
Yeah,
this as well,
overall.
right? So Neon saw it. This is despite the fact that many of those organizations will be filtering their recurring givers out of their appeals, out of their engagements, right? Because I've heard I don't want to remind them to turn it off. I've
Yeah.
heard
Oh
I don't
gosh,
want to
set it and
bother
forget
them.
it
I
is
don't
like
want to
the
bother them
worst.
again, right? Like you're literally leaving the best customer out of the engagement.
Yeah.
Despite that, it still gets a great result.
Yep. Yep. No, for sure. No, it's just I think it's a piece, and your point about, and again, I'm so grateful. I think about Giving Tuesday, and even just your point about how Asha and her co-founder, sort of had this open-handed approach to, like, we're not going to own a thing, which is so smart. But that clearly, that open-handed approach has stayed through to, like, okay, let's just explore what does the data around Giving Tuesday and then around philanthropy. And I mean, you didn't say it, but I'll say it. I mean, you guys have, I think it was almost 2,000 collaborators that are a part of the Data
I'm probably
Commons.
at over 2,400 now.
2,400. Okay, wow.
And it's growing all the time.
It's growing. I joined early on. Being a part of the working groups. Number one, it's that open-handed approach. Like, we're all pushing for the same thing, which is how do we grow and inspire generosity. And so I am just such a fan.
Well, thank you. I mean, I part of it is just what I call strategic laziness. Why would
Do
we do
tell. This is
something?
listen in, everybody.
Why would we do something somebody else can do or would
Amen.
do, right?
Yeah.
And that is definitely part of it. And also because we need collective solutions to these problems we're trying to solve, and what we bring to the table is the ability to do that convening and create those connections and build the intersecting infrastructure that is needed in order
So
to enable it. But the data commons, the data is not ours mostly, right? And from the very beginning, well, it's actually what we did was we sat down. This was very intentional, right? I think there's misunderstandings about Giving Tuesday and about the Giving Tuesday Data Commons because um, I think people sort of expect it to be something that it's not.
yeah.
When we started building out the Data Commons, when we were just starting to get some traction, and we had some data assets that had never been collected before, and we were really seeing what the opportunity was to get some deeper understanding. We really looked at, okay, there are data problems, well understood data problems in the nonprofit sector. And
Mm-hmm.
so we went out to look at how have people been trying to solve these problems before. And it was really clear that there are three best practices to addressing the lack of accessible, actionable data in the nonprofit sector, and
Okay.
that everybody was essentially recognized that these were the three ways to do this, and every initiative was some combination of those three. And the only problem was it just always didn't work. And so we really took a very intentionally took a different approach on all of that. And one of the key things, because what you're talking about is, yes, it's collective 100% and it's open and everybody can contribute. But people think that we are consensus builders, and that's not what we're doing. We are trying to build consensus is one of the three ways we see these data initiatives have been failing time and time again. And that was key to unlocking what has become an enormous enterprise.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, can you rattle the three off? So one is consensus building.
Yeah, consensus building one, get
Okay.
right, fails every time because partly because
Building consensus is
it's so
hard.
insidious that it feels so good, and we all agree that
Yeah.
that we should all accomplish this together. But
But
if it doesn't deliver on somebody's actual mission,
it's
which
really,
might
and it's
be
really hard work.
it might be profit, right? Like
Yep.
we work
Yep.
with big companies. If they don't have skin in the game, they're just not going to be able to devote the resources as much as they might be genuinely aligned on the concept and what we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
Differentiated value is what mattered. The other two things were standards and tech forward. Like this, the problem is not technology. The problem is culture and practice. And
Okay.
so there was a lot of like building standards. If we just build the right data standard and everybody just conforms with that data standard, then we'll
Right.
have perfect data and everything will be fine. The problem is that there are insufficient incentives to get everybody to apply your data standard. It's not that standards aren't a useful tool, but
Mm.
interoperability is a goal, not standardization. And standardization has just been such an obstacle to getting any project successful. And then the third one is governance. And it like we have very robust and like governance is hugely important. We have companies corporate proprietary data on our servers. They have to trust that we're
Right.
going to be treating that very carefully. But if what you try to do is build the perfect governance model and the perfect legal framework first, then all you get is lawyers talking for a long time. And the and
Yeah. An ironclad set of governance materials that nobody
right.
uses.
And all you're doing there is talking about all of the ways something is going to be a problem and not and so we're and it prevents you from doing what you're able to do now today, right? So you're thinking about the perfect environment that for what you want to do a decade from now and trying to set yourself up from that for that, and that's too big an obstacle. Instead, if you just start with what you can do today,
Yeah.
then with the people who you can do it with,
Yep.
that's how you start building momentum. And that also means, it means not one size fits all governance. And that's the other thing. Like we have governance principles. The data belongs to the participants who bring it in. And when
Yep.
they don't feel like they're getting value, we will delete it. It's pretty simple, right? And we won't take any sensitive personally identifiable data. We won't keep any
Yep.
of it, but we'll treat it all as if it is that sensitive. So those are our basic principles. And then, but everybody always tries to essentially, if you do one size fits all, what you end up with is whatever is the most complex situation is what everybody has to do, and so
Yeah.
you're indexing on the highest common denominator and you don't get anywhere. So we
Yeah.
really set out
That's
very
so good.
deliberately to build something that turns each of those three things on its head.
I love that. Well, I want to call it a few principles, and then I've got a choose your own adventure question to close us. But a few principles I want to call out from what you're saying. Number one of the things I say is that one of the things I most respect about charity leaders that are really effective fundraisers, candidly, as well as just charity leaders, leaders in general, is they leverage what I call their natural resources. Like, what are our organizations' just natural gifts and
Mhm.
um, just the natural resources that exist within our organization. And I think far too often it's easy as a especially as a cause leader to be like, oh man, I wish I had a celebrity founder, or I wish
Right.
we had all of this infrastructure, or I wish
Yes.
we had all that,
Right.
whatever the whatevers is.
Yeah.
And what we've talked about today is this DNA, and I would call it open-handed. I don't know what language you use, of just like, we're not going to try to own everything. Like, that's an actual natural resource of the organization.
Yeah.
Um, and you've built value for other organizations as you've done that. Like, it's pretty amazing. And to be clear, Giving Tuesday is a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I feel like, because I come from the for-profit working with nonprofits field, it's super easy to almost slip into with that level of candidly effectiveness. Like, I think it's easy to forget that. So, and then the second thing I want to point out, your point about what can you do today, and who's willing to work with you. I always say, especially when it comes to innovation, work with the willing. Like it
Yes.
can be so easy to be like, "Yeah, I really wish," and I'm preaching to myself when I say this, by the way. It's like,
Sure. We all
yeah,
fall
I
into that.
wouldn't it be nice? But
Yeah.
let's just work with the willing. And
I think
it's yeah.
so. We do that with donors too, right?
Ooh,
We think about we think about the donor who said no, and how do I arrange my fundraising around that skeptic or the person who thinks that nonprofit doesn't trust nonprofits. We over index on these folks, right? I'm worried about the people who unsubscribed, or instead of focusing on the where the people who believe in the mission, who who believe in your integrity and that want to help. And we end up very, very focused on how do we how do we shift these people who are
cajole.
and
Yeah,
meanwhile we see there's $52 billion left on the table every year by the nonprofit sector, because 19 of which is just not asking not asking people because we don't value their contributions, or because we're over indexing on convincing this shrinking pool of high net worth donors. And I'm not saying don't try
yeah,
to get their money, but we just can't be only doing that. And it's costing us at least $19 billion a year in not being inclusive, because we worry about the people who are more skeptical,
yeah.
less generous.
Just so I understand, the 19 billion. That's people that. What is that?
So we looked at the profile of people who responded to nonprofit solicitation.
Okay.
And we can see people who look just like them in their values and their behaviors and all of the things that correlate with action, but who just were not asked,
Yeah.
and estimated what if they were asked? What if they were
Right.
asked to
Yep.
invited to contribute and given the opportunity to
Wow.
do good? The low end of that estimate was 19 billion
19
a
to
year.
52 is the high end.
Well, the high end on that particular segment is 46 billion. So between 19 and 46 billion a
Wow.
year in an inequitable invitation to give.
Yeah.
This is the everyday giver who's just not being valued by the sector. And we know a lot about them. And they're ready to give if they're asked. And so that 52 billion is at least 10 billion in recurring,
Yeah.
at least 19 billion in an open invitation. And the third component of that 52 is $23 billion a year left on the table in the summer when the sector is less active. If we were just
Yeah.
a little
Oh
more
man.
active in the middle of the year, $23 billion more a year.
All right, we're gonna have to do a part two because I want to get it. I want to dig into invented holidays.
Yes,
Giving
right?
Tuesday being great, and then how do we change patterns? Because I would not have said changing donor patterns was possible before Giving Tuesday proved that it was. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about just candidly dig deeper into the opportunity. We didn't talk about donor advised funds. There's a lot for us to cover.
I
Um,
would be happy to come back. I love talking to you about this stuff, and with the microphone in front of me is just fine too.
Let's do that. I know. I
Um,
love it. It's like these conversations are so great. And you've probably experienced that. You have them, you have these great conversations off mic. And not that everything needs a mic, but I do think it's just helpful for the sector. So thank you, Woodrow. Do you have time for one final choose your own adventure question?
of course.
Okay, give me a number. Actually, it's not a choose your own adventure, it's a blind draw. That's what it
Okay.
is. So give me a number between 1 and 5.
Okay. 3.
Okay. Question number 3. What is one thing that you love about sustainable giving? Something that just lights you up when you talk about it.
My favorite thing is not the financial outcome. My favorite thing about it is that I think the opportunity it has to move us into a much more engaging interaction with supporters that isn't transactional. It maybe is almost ironic to think about this. We're gonna like this mechanism that feels very, very much like a financial transaction model, but what it does is it
It's not,
frees
yeah.
us to be in dialogue. It almost demands that we're in dialogue instead of a transaction mode. So I think that's my favorite part.
I love that. It's that, and I don't want to keep saying the way of life, but it's not about the giving. It's about the sustainability. It's about the relationship. It's about the belonging. It's about the
100%.
community.
Yes.
And the fact that it is sustainable is the thing that gets us to walk away
Right.
from the transactional mindset.
Yeah, this is it.
I think that's a good way to end. Thank you, Woodrow. Super excited to have you, and we'll do this again sometime.
Looking forward to it.
All right, man.
Have a good one.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Sustainable Giving Podcast. I hope you found the information helpful and that you're able to walk away with some powerful tools that you can use to start building a steady stream of recurring revenue for your organization. For more information about the topic and to take the Sustainable Giving self-assessment, visit us online at sustainablegiving.org. While you're there, you can pick up your copy of The Rise of Sustainable Giving, your guide to growing recurring giving. And hey, would you do me a favor? If a person comes to mind that you think would benefit from this episode, would you mind sharing this episode with them? Just that little act could be the difference that they need to start growing sustainable giving for their own organization. And there's one other thing that you can do that would be a huge blessing to me. I've timed it and it takes just 16 seconds. Would you consider rating the show? Just head to the show page on the app of your choice, and if you've enjoyed this show, hit the 5-star review. Bonus, if you want to leave a comment, I would love to hear what you think. Special thanks to the entire team at Imago Productions for bringing this show to life. Abigail, Christine, Grace, Kirsten, and Tom, this would not be possible without you. Until next time, thank you for joining us, and keep inspiring generosity.